This episode has you pulling your background thoughts about your self-image out of the darkness and into the light, looking specifically for where they came from and who they came from. Then you will toss out the untrue and outdated thoughts and replace them with better options. This exercise is very revealing. I think that what you learn from it is going to stick with you for a while, but in a good way. Doing this work helps you see how you've been adopting other people's views and stories about you without realizing it. And once you learn how to see these, which I'm going to walk you through, they are really hard to unsee, which is a good thing because that makes it easier to deal with them. Welcome to the Audacious Year. This season is a deep dive into remodeling your identity and self-image. I'm Jody, and I want to build a movement of deeply confident, powerful women who are leading companies, scaling their businesses, running for office, and leading movements. My job is to help you get out of your own way. Think of your mind as a house you've lived in for years. Over time, dust bunnies of doubt have gathered in the corners. These aren't the obvious loud thoughts that tell you you're not good enough. Those are usually easier to fix. No, these are the subtle, sneaky thoughts that have settled into the background of your mind like this fine dust, quietly influencing how you see yourself. I call these sneaky identity floater thoughts. You could call them SIFTs, but that's kind of hard to say anyway. And these sneaky identity floater thoughts are more powerful than you might think. They're right there when you hesitate before speaking up in meetings. They are those quiet assumptions that have you double checking when you are more than qualified to make the call. And as you think about building deep confidence in your self-image, it's important to know where you might be getting in your own way. And one way we throw roadblocks in front of ourselves is with our negative thoughts about ourselves, these sneaky identity floater thoughts. So in this episode, we're going to sift through and sift out your SIFTs, those sneaky negative thoughts floating around in the background of your mind that are shaping how you see yourself, shaping your identity. We are going to write those down, identify where they came from. Then we will work on letting go of those thoughts that don't serve you, give some kudos for working on the ones that feel current and relevant, and see what lessons you might still need to extract. We are doing this because we want to make sure that the identity we define for ourselves is fully intentional. That means that if we have areas for improvement, we embrace those. Also, we don't want to automatically hold on to outdated ideas about who we are and our identity without taking a close look at them first. Oftentimes, we have other people's voices in our heads, our parents, a bratty childhood friend from decades ago, a bossy sibling, society, and occasionally your voice is in there too. Sometimes we even formulate thoughts about ourselves based on how we think another person sees us, even if they never said anything to indicate that thought. We really need to be careful about those sneaky thoughts. We want to get these on paper in order to get a clear-eyed look at where we genuinely might benefit from making changes and where we are just unnecessarily making ourselves feel bad using somebody else's voice. Now, you don't need to look hard to find your sneaky identity floater thoughts. Think of the criticisms that you have for yourself or ways that you think you don't measure up. The things that come up might land as true or self-evident. They might be things you don't like about yourself but have come to accept. Maybe they're things you've believed to be true about you for a long time. So what we want to do is get these out on paper and then we'll deal with them. So your sneaky identity floater thoughts might come in verbal form. They might be images or essences. They might be memories. So just be open to how they might show up. When you think about the verbal ones, here are some that I jotted down, like I'm not smart enough, or I'm not assertive, or I shouldn't take up too much space or be too loud. Like these are ones that came from all kinds of different things that aren't necessarily me. So the I'm not smart enough one, I think I adopted that one moving from fire to grad school. But the one about I'm not assertive, that actually came from a memory. Growing up, I had this best friend friend who was just like such a boss, you know? She was like really comfortable being confrontational, had no problem standing up for herself or standing for what she believed in. And that just made me super uncomfortable. And so from just being around her and seeing how she interacted with the world, I created this conclusion about myself that I'm not assertive. And it's just, not necessarily true. I have plenty of evidence to say that I am, but that sneaky identity floater thought is in my mind. It's living there in my mind, and it's connected to these early memories. I shouldn't take up too much space or be too loud. That is like gendered socialization right there. Like probably so many women out there, women and girls, know this one really well. You don't even have to hear it really, but you respond to it and you follow it without even recognizing it. You might have some that are like some sneaky identity floater thoughts that are more like images. So I have one of like early on organizing big research projects as a professor, as a researcher, and just feeling like I didn't have all the pieces together. So I have a memory, or I have a sneaky identity floater thought that's kind of names this compilation of memories of not being great at organizing these people and projects. And that sneaky identity floater thought is something to the effect of, I'm a hot mess at organizing people. So just notice what kind of form they take on. Sometimes they're verbal, sometimes they're tied to a memory, sometimes they're just like an essence. It's even possible to think about how you think other people see you. So I think that hot mess one, that could be tied to, how I think other people must think of me given how disorganized I am in this moment or whatever. So after you get these down on the page, you want to look at that list and write next to each one where it came from. And I found that you can usually identify whose voice is saying this. So write that down. So if you had a parent who was like, you are so bad with money, you can hear their voice saying that, right? It's really important to make sure that you do something constructive with these negative thoughts. You either need to replace them if they are not true or they are outdated, or take the lesson and move on. So for the thoughts that represent things you're actively working on and have made progress on, pause and give yourself a little bit of kudos. Like, what you don't want to do is passively adopt them as part of your identity, because that's only going to get in your way. So that whole hot mess thing, like, I've come a long way in how I organize people and projects these days. But those early memories of being kind of messy about it, they like stick with you, right? So you want to acknowledge that and say, yeah, I used to be kind of messy at that, but I'm getting better, That's why I want to get better, is because of those memories. So just give yourself that credit. Take the time to really work through these thoughts, because having awareness about these sneaky identity floater thoughts will give you such a sense of freedom, because you will be able to see how wildly inaccurate many of them are and how outdated many of them are. And you're going to realize that you've been living your life for years passively taking for granted that these thoughts, which are in some cases outright untrue, have somehow defined you. How mind-blowing and unfortunate is that? So once you see these, you can't unsee them. You see the face of the person who said it. You go back into that memory of when it happened, and you see how ridiculous it is and how much time has passed since who you were when you were 6 years old with your bratty friend who loves being a boss. You see how wrong people who said these things were about you, how little they knew about the situation, how little they understood about you. And the best part is that you get to choose whether you want to keep that sneaky identity floater thought in your identity story, or if you want to get rid of it. And when you see so clearly how inaccurate many of these thoughts are, it's much easier to move on from them permanently. It's much easier to let go of them and not give them any credibility in the future. The problem with these sneaky identity floater thoughts is that we take these views for granted as true about ourselves when they might be really inaccurate. They might be blatantly mean things that somebody said to us carelessly, or maybe we don't believe them at all once we actually take a close look at where they came from and who said it, or the memory that it's tied to. So let's go back to that hot mess example. Let's say you feel like a hot mess. You have so many things going on and there are some loose ends lying around, but what you want to feel like is that 2.0 version of yourself, that CEO that you imagine yourself as. What we want to do is tap into what it feels like to be that CEO version. So for the sake of illustration, I'm going to imagine my CEO version, my 2.0, is this calm, solution-oriented person focused on what works best for clients and somebody who, in general, looks and acts put together. So to keep it simple, let's sum up this CEO's vibe as like put together. Now, the thing that will change you from being a hot mess, your 1.0 hot mess, to being your 2.0 put together will be cultivating the ability to see all the ways you are put together and to build on those. Because noticing how you're already put together opens the door for new ideas on how to build on that. And right now, you don't feel that put together is an accessible option for you because you have so much going on and you just don't feel in control of all of it. What you want to feel is less chaotic so you can anchor into the feeling of being that put together CEO and not that hot mess 1.0, juggling too many things and breaking under pressure. You know that moment when you don't answer that email right away and then it gets buried under a million other emails, and then like 2 weeks go by and you finally discover it again, but now you're agonizing over how you want to word your response because you're so late. You don't want to look like some flake who only checks their email once every 2 weeks, and you also don't want to look like somebody who doesn't respect the other person's time because like you blew it off for 2 weeks. So you don't want to be groveling in your email for forgiveness and apologizing. And the whole situation just has this hot mess feel to it. Or maybe you're running late. You planned your commute time to get there right on the dot. Then you hit a traffic slowdown, and then maybe you couldn't find parking close by, and you're panicking because you're going to show up looking like a hot mess with this late, super raggedy energy. Or maybe you have a meeting with a client or a podcast interview and you didn't prepare. So you roll with it and you do the best you can, but later on you keep thinking about the missed opportunities to teach something helpful to the client, or you think of all the other things you could have talked about on the interview if you just given it some time ahead of time. And because of all of this, you just feel like you're not living up to that put together CEO that you know you could be. Now, what you want to cultivate is the ability to sit with these moments of regret, that you have a feeling like you're a hot mess. You want to sit with those moments without shame, and you want to really look at them. And here's what you're looking for. Moments like this can tell you what mindset you want to leave behind and the mindset that you want to adopt. So if you look closely at these moments, you might notice that what you thought was a pattern of behavior for you was really just a few one-off moments that you put a lot of emphasis on. You think you're a hot mess because you were running late a few times and felt bad about it. You might even notice that your more normal patterns of behavior give stronger evidence to support that you are indeed put together, that most of the time you allow yourself plenty of time. Most of the time you get right back to people on the email. When you get in the habit of sitting with these moments you regret and really looking at them, you'll get better at seeing how they are not representative of who you are, and that there is so much more that does and can define you. What would be helpful is if you could see moments like this from a mile away so that you can plan ahead for them and meet these moments with that put together vibe that you want to radiate. And when you learn the skill of how to transition from hot mess into put together CEO for the first time, it's easy to apply that technique to future situations. And when you can do that, that's when you start taking your goals to the next level, because you know exactly who you are and what you think of yourself. You are no longer focused on other people's actual or possible impressions of you. And you'll know you've embodied that put together vibe when you can walk into a room or show up online and not wonder or care what other people think of you. When you know to take a moment to get clear on what you think of you and you take time to really appreciate that. When you recognize others might have some certain impression of you or expectation for you to perform in a particular way, but you are able to hold those impressions and expectations apart from you and not let them become a self-fulfilling prophecy. You won't let your actions feed their unsaid expectations of you, if that makes sense. And by not being reactive to their energy, in the situation, you have the ability to redirect that energy and set the vibe of that room yourself. When you fully embrace that, you decide how you want to show up, and you can set new default behaviors for yourself that reflect your CEO self. When you have a new default, that's when you've embodied your 2.0. When your 2.0 comes naturally for you, that's when your goals start getting a whole lot bigger because you realize you can make yourself into whoever you need to be to reach them. Nothing is off limits for you when you know how to become that person by cleaning up all the little cobwebs, these sneaky identity floater thoughts that are holding you back. It can be challenging to move out of a hot mess 1.0 vibe when you're not aware of when and how it shows up. So, in the Power Identity Redesign course, I will walk you through a simple process of dealing with your sneaky identity floater thoughts. I'll also guide you through a more advanced process of looking into your memories for evidence and patterns that support your 2.0 and patterns that you're tired of from your 1.0. So take some time to reflect on your sneaky identity floater thoughts. Whose voice are they in? What memories are they tied to? Are they even true? Are they accurate still? I'm really excited for you to do this work and see what amazing qualities you discover about yourself. So as you do this, allow yourself to see how you have been really hard on yourself over the years. Allow yourself to see how you have been unfair to yourself, not giving yourself enough credit. And really open your heart to seeing, to deeply seeing the brave and resilient younger version of you who did what it took to get you where you are right this minute. See her. And we will talk next week. I've designed this show entirely around helping the most people possible get from 1.0 to 2.0. If you follow the podcast, which is of course free, I introduce you to tools for transformation that you can use right away. Make sure to subscribe. And in the show notes, you'll see a link to sign up for my email blog where I'll send you weekly reflections from the podcast. If you want to fully embody the core transformations, then you can buy the class, the Power Identity Redesign. I also invite you to work with me.